and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Thank you all for coming today. And continuing the marriage series, today part 4, we're going to talk about courtship. Just as a kind of a small recap of what we've been speaking over the last few weeks in the marriage series. Number 1, we defined what marriage is, why we get married, what are the characteristics of in Christian marriage, and what marriage is versus what marriage is not. And in the second week, we spoke about maturity. So what it takes to be mature to go into a marriage. How do I judge myself if I'm mature and ready? And how do I judge another person that I may choose for a life partner? Last week, we spoke about ideal circumstances. What are the ideal situations going into a relationship and going into a marriage and that are good to have, that, as we know, would help to minimize conflict in marriage. Today I'd like to talk to you about courtship, and in today's what we're going to cover, we're going to discuss definitions and terminology of courtship and courtship versus dating, stages of courtship, the methods of initiation to a relationship, what should happen and what should not happen during the courtship period. So, to start with definitions, I'm going to start with dating. And if you ask someone what dating is, you probably can get a lot of explanation. You can get a lot of definitions out of how someone views dating. But for this sake of purpose, and the most maybe common thing that we can understand of dating, it's a process whereby two people meet socially for companionship, which is beyond the level of friendship. While the term has several meanings, it usually refers to the act of meeting. Remember that. It refers to the act of meeting and engaging in some mutually agreed upon social activity in public together as a couple. Then, courtship. Courtship is a period during which two people are getting to know each other and assessing compatibility with, and here's the in bold letter, intent and goal for marriage. So when you look at courtship versus just dating, I'm going to start with the verse that St. Paul says, "All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify." So dating in itself is not a goal. It's a means to a goal. If you remember by the definition of dating, we're saying it's a process. It's a way of getting. It's a way to meet someone. It's actually a process. It's not itself is a goal. Whereas courtship not only involves the intent of marriage, but also taking the actual steps like an engagement in an appropriate time frame leading to marriage. Courtship should not be initiated without having a minimum standard, which we discussed over last couple of weeks. The 4 maturities in education, financial abilities, the readiness to marry in an appropriate time frame, ideal situations, legal age, etc. So again, dating here, it's a tool. It's not a goal. Unfortunately, a lot of people and we see this among youth, where they want to be in a relationship. They want to be in something. And unfortunately, being that dating is a tool or it's a means to a goal, it's going to be a means to something. And I would, if I would compare it to a bridge, nobody walks on a bridge just for the sake of walking on a bridge. A bridge has a purpose. It gets you from one destination to another. So, in this case, dating could be a bridge that leads to holiness, which at the end of the destination it's marriage. But also, dating can lead to unholiness. And that's why, without this intent of marriage, without marriage being in the picture, this is where then the dating becomes an unedifying thing, as St. Paul says. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. So if we understand the difference between dating and understand the concept of courtship, yes, in courtship there is dating. It's a process too, but with a goal. And as I mentioned in this slide, it shouldn't be initiated without having a minimum standard. There should be all these things in one person's life or in a couple's circumstance before they initiate a courtship. I think when someone, especially when the youth ask me, am I ready to date right now? When can I start dating? I said, are you ready to put a ring around the finger? No, I can't do that now. Okay, well, then you're not ready to start. Because that has to be the goal. If you cannot make the goal within a certain time frame, you're going to have this problem. And someone might tell me, well, I have that goal, and actually I'm going to mention towards the end some examples of right and wrong courtship. But sometimes, I might have the intent for marriage, but I'm not fully mature, I'm not done with school, I don't have the financial abilities to take care of a home. Well, or it's going to take me at least 10 years before I get married to this person. That's a long process. That's unhealthy. That's unhealthy. And I mentioned that last week when I said not too short or too long of a courtship. Because too short, not enough time, but too long also can create scenarios and problems. Stages of courtship. Initiation and agreement. So, boy meets girl. This is when a man and a woman have a mutual interest and initiate, like a ring exchange or meeting of families, and begin assessing compatibilities. So or could be, you're getting to know someone and they're showing interest and you have an agreed interest and you start a process. Actually, this is when the process starts. The next would be an engagement. An engagement or betrothal, it's a period preceding the sacrament of marriage, which in the church, you have to be engaged minimum 40 days before you get married. And the reason, and just to let everybody know, the church officially only acknowledges a relationship at an engagement. It does not, right? Because, when we look, the only times, we actually recognize it when this is something official, it's the engagement. Yes, you might do what they call an exchange of rings, where priest might just say the Thanksgiving prayer and you guys place some rings on, but officially the church recognized the relationship at the engagement. And it has to be 40 days minimum before a wedding. That means you can't get engaged today and marry in 2 weeks. You have to have that 40 days. And the point of the concept of 40 days is the church is trying to force the couple to spend time to get to know each other before you make this decision. And I know everyone's going to say, 4 days is not enough. Yes, it's but at the same time, the church doesn't want to do an undue burden for the people. So they have the 40 days. And yes, most people don't start courtship at an engagement. They probably have gotten to know each other for some time, and then they took it to the next level, which is the engagement. And in the period preceding the sacrament, it's 40 days, which there's prayers. So there's the 3 blessings, very similar to what we do in the wedding crowning ceremony. We pray on the rings. Then the Thanksgiving prayer, and then there are commandments that are given for the couple, and the exchange of the ring happens, and they also have to sign a contract. And in this contract, they're taking a pledge and commitment before God and the church, and from that point on, you're supposed to assess the relationship even more. You're supposed to assess the relationship even more, having open and honest discussions, again, with the goal and planning for marriage. The methods of initiating courtship. Number one, there are three basic ways. Unplanned. For example, when I mean unplanned, an event. You met someone at an event. You met someone at church. You met someone in a convention, or you went to college and you met someone. Generally speaking, this is initiated emotionally. This is what you say, the love at first sight. So yeah, maybe there are couples that had, the way they came, or the way they got that led marriage was, it starts this way. It's initiated that way. Hopefully the unplanned is not at a bar or in an appropriate place. Hopefully it's something more proper, and actually that should even be used as a way to filter out, circumstances. The second way of initiating a courtship, planned. So it's through a mutual person or persons, such as friends, family members, etc. Generally initiated by trust in the mutual person. Actually, this is me. So the way I met Sarah, my wife, her uncle, who knew me and my family very well, got us together. It's not like I just happened to meet Sarah somewhere. She lived in Egypt and I lived here in the States, and her uncle, or actually my dad started to talk to her uncle, who happens to be a priest. And he's like, you know what, I got someone for your son. It was his niece. And that's how, and so there is a trust in that mutual person. So for me, I trusted her uncle. And of course, Sarah trusted her uncle. And usually in this group of people, in the beginning, there's not a lot of emotions. Because it wasn't unplanned. It wasn't that love at first sight. But we trusted. Eventually, it turns into emotional. But it didn't start that way. The third, which is an ever-growing one, internet and social media. Generally, this is initiated by purely looks. You know what? You open up Facebook, you see someone, wow. I'm curious, let me send the message. Generally this is how it's based. It's not like, oh wow, this is a good church person, this is wow, because you don't know any of that stuff. When, like for example, in my situation, when I asked the mutual person, her uncle, you know what, she's a God-fearing woman, she's a dentist, she's this. So I'm getting to know her personality through the mutual trusted person. And I'm actually getting to know her personality. That's how, and the same thing. Her uncle sound girl, yeah, he's a God-fearing man, comes from a good family, he's a pharmacist, working, blah, blah, 1, 2, 3. But when you open up social media, it's purely looks. It's a vision. I'm not saying this is wrong, but I'm just telling you, these initiation of courtship, like I would say in this third group, you're going to need to really, it takes a lot more digging. Maybe an unplanned one, like for example, you might grew up with someone in the same church. You already kind of got to know this person. The mutual person, someone you completely trust, like in my situation. But when you open up internet, social media, and just find some random person anywhere, and you're all of a sudden, I'm interested in this person, you know nothing, there's no background. So you need to really dig deep. And because this is relatively new in the last 10, 15 years, we're still learning a lot. We don't know, and unfortunately with the internet, as we all know, you can make up things. I can take a picture of myself and just take my head and put on the bodybuilder's body. I can, you can change things around. So we don't know. I'm not saying it's wrong, but you need to be extra search and assessing the relationship more, because you're not really going to get it from a picture. What should happen during courtship? Going into courtship with a clear understanding, goal, and commitment to marriage. I should not be in a courtship unless I have a clear goal. That it and commitment. I might have a goal for marriage, but am I really committed to it? Am I taking steps? Assessing the relationship and judging in a spiritual and mindful manner rather than emotional. And I spoke about this in lecture 2 about maturity, and even in the order of maturity, I should, number 1, be spiritually mature, then psychologically mature, then emotionally mature, and then financially and economically mature. When you go in that order, you judge in a better way. A lot of problems that we see, even when people are in courtship, they're not assessing the relationship. They're in it, not knowing why they're in it, or they're happy they're in emotionally that I'm in a relationship, but they didn't assess the person, and then when you go without assessing, then you get married, and all of a sudden real life takes, and oh my Lord, what did I get myself into? So we have to assess, and that's very important. What should also happen in courtship? Having guidance from parents and father of confession on the relationship. Should get feedback. Don't go in alone. Don't be like, oh, I'm an adult, I don't need anyone's opinion. Yeah, you're an adult and you're going to make your final decision, but don't go without feedback. And I mentioned this last time in the previous lecture, that it's a big thing when you get the blessing of the parents. I can't explain that. Maybe just from experience as a priest and what we have seen, those that marry against their parents' wishes tend to have more conflict in their marriages than those that have the blessing. And I compared it to 2 different circumstances, even in scripture, as Isaac got the blessing of his father Abraham versus Samson, who did not get the blessing of his parents. What should also happen in courtship? Having a clear understanding and implementation of boundaries and limitation of each stage in courtship as guided by parents or father confession. Actually, if you want to take a guidance, I always tell any couple, go with the stricter of the 2 rules. In other words, let's just for argument's sake, if I'm your father of confession, and I tell you it's okay that you can hang out till 10 p.m. at night. And let's say the dad of the girl says, no, you got to be home by 9. Go with that rule. If it's the opposite, if the father's like, yeah, you can hang out till 1 o'clock at night, I don't mind. But the priest says, no, be home by 10. Go with the stricter of the 2 rules. Go with the stricter of the 2 rules. If you do this, believe it or not, it will be a blessing for you. Because whether it's the parent or the father of confession, they're really there for your best interest. And these boundaries that you put in and implement will even be a source for you to how to assess a relationship. So I'll give you an example. When I went to Egypt and I got engaged, and I was only, and we got engaged November 8 in 2005. And I was in Egypt for a week because I had to come back for work. And I'm figuring, well, I'm here for a week, I might as well get as much time as I can to get to know her more face to face. And her dad told me, you need to bring her home by 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock?
I had to bring her home every day by 9 o'clock.
Oh, wow.
I said, sure. 8:50 every day. Every day. And I know you might look at this and say, well, that's a bit extreme. But I'm going to show you a perspective to understand why this was right from the dad. If I didn't respect his time, and keep in mind, him being a father, and compared to me, is authority. If I could not respect an elder man, what sign is that telling him I'm going to do to his daughter, my equal? I'm not going to respect her. If I couldn't respect him, I can't, and his wishes, that means I'm not going to respect his daughter. And that would have been a sign for him that maybe, you he need to really take it back. Hey, they're going to be, he can see concern. So, when you, and even with my father, confession, actually, my father had a confession, happened to be in Egypt when I got engaged, and it was at my engagement. Even then, he told us, after we got engaged, that I was not even allowed to hold her hand. The rule for me was, she put her hand here, and I walked with her like this. So I had it from both ends. But I will say something. I thank both my father confession, my father-in-law for that, for many reasons. But this was the way it protected my relationship. This is the way that the father was able to assess my credibility, and even for my wife-to-be to assess that, am I the man that she heard I am? And is she the lady that I heard she is? By having these boundaries, this even is a tool for you to measure and assess the relationship. Another thing that should happen during courtship, you must keep the relationship holy and pure. If you do this, your marriage will be more blessed and more blessed and more blessed. Because when this boundary gets broken, then the relationship gets cloudy. The relationship gets cloudy. I'm not saying it can't end up to marriage, and yes, I understand sometimes people make mistakes and they can confess, but we must keep the relationship holy and pure. Because as if I'm mature, and I'll show you how this affects the relationship in the future. If I'm mature and I hold myself and keep the relationship holy and pure, then later when I'm married and I get tempted, I'm going to keep my marriage holy and pure. But if I say, well, I can't control myself, and I'm just acting according to my feelings, yeah, well, what's going to happen when you fight with your spouse and all of a sudden someone else is getting your attention? Well, I can't control myself. Well, that person is just too attractive. So it not only affects, and assessing the relationship, and actually it does affect the relationship negatively, and I'll tell you how. Keep in mind, intimacy between a husband and wife is a great thing. And one of the effects that the intimacy has in a relationship, it makes the feelings and the bond stronger between the husband and wife. That same feelings will happen if you have that type of intimacy before marriage. That's why we get couples that when they fall before marriage, and I can hear someone tells me this all the time, Father, when I'm judging this relationship, my mind says I shouldn't marry this person, but my heart says marry this person. When they say their heart, that most likely meant that they got too physically intimate. So it caused the bond. It's going to happen. It's going to cause a bond. Whether it's the right person or not, it causes a bond. Now, again, we want this bond to happen in marriage. That's why we have to stay holy and pure. What else should we do when it should happen during courtship? We must treat each stage accordingly. And what do I mean? A couple that just initiated the relationship, in other words, boy meets girl, should not treat the relationship like they're engaged or married right now. And an engaged couple should not treat the relationship like they are married. You know, so you have to treat each stage accordingly. I'll give you an example. Usually, like for example, when you initiate, a boy meets girl. Usually the conversation will be about, what are your interests, what do you do, what do you like, you know, who your friends are and stuff like that. You're not going to go on the first date and say, are you planning to have kids right away after marriage? It's not a conversation to have from the beginning. That should happen after engagement. But in the initiation phase, we're just going to get to know each other and each other's interests. Then when we get engaged, we take more serious conversations. But as an engaged couple, we shouldn't act like we're married. We have to treat each stage accordingly. Because here's the issue. One of the issues that can also come arise. If you start treating the relationship more than what it is, and let's say down the line, things don't work out. And we know breaking up hurts. But it hurts more because you acted more than what it was. If I was just talking to someone, or if a couple is starting to talk to someone, and after a couple of weeks of just hanging out at Starbucks or something like that, things don't work out, fine. Yeah, it didn't work out, but it wasn't painful. But from day one, we're getting too physical and falling in sin. And then spend a lot of money and do a lot of things that shouldn't have happened right away. And then after a few months, we break up. The pain experience is detrimental. As if you lived a lifetime with this person and suddenly it just broke. That's why you have to treat it each step along the way. What should not happen during courtship? Number one, inappropriate physical contact and the breaking of boundaries. I think this is pretty obvious and understood. Anything outside of marriage, in the intimate level, it would be considered sin. Number two, being in multiple relationships. And what do I mean here? So for example, you might have someone, so let's say a guy is interested in two girls. Well, he'll talk to one girl, and at the same time he's talking to another girl. This is wrong. You know what? If you have to pick one person and say, I'm going to start with this person. If things don't work out, then, and the other person assuming is free, then you can go to that one. But to try to say, let me take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, try to see which one I like the most, it's going to cause confusion. It's going to cause confusion. And it's not fair. I mean, think about it. I don't think I would wish someone is juggling between me and another person. I don't think anyone here would like the feeling of, well, I was being compared to someone else at the same time. This is not good. You start, once you, and I mean start, at the initiation, boy meets girl, in other words, I show interest, you show interest, it started. It started. Even though, yes, I said the church only recognized engagement, but you started. And once you started, you need to commit to it until you find that, no, we can't work together. We're not meant to be. Then fine, then you can go and look, you can initiate another relationship, but not multiple at one time. This is wrong. What should not also happen, a lack of assessing relationship. A lot of times, people go into a relationship emotionally and not think of assessing and judging situations or ignore certain circumstances, and they're just focusing on the wedding day and the planning and the honeymoon but they didn't assess the person, and then later down when they get married, what did we just get ourselves into? So you must make sure you assess. Lack of assessing relationship is not a good thing. What also should not happen? Lack of commitment. And matter of fact, this is somehow, maybe it's just my personal feeling, it's a growing trend. This is, and what I mean lack of commitment. Boy interested in girl, and has a goal. I want to get married. But after a year and a half, no steps were taken. Where's this going? If I'm really committed, it shouldn't take long. Matter of fact, if you do this right, assuming all the ideal circumstances, or most of the ideal circumstances, assuming the maturity is right on both ends, the same goal, it really shouldn't take more than a few months to say, okay, we can take this to the next level and get engaged. If you do this right. If you're going to take 2 years to figure out, should I engage her, something's not right. There's something, or fear of commitment. And then that, or the lack of commitment can eventually turn into sin. Well, I'm enjoying the relationship, but I don't want to tie myself down. But I still want to be in this relationship. And that's wrong. If you're gonna go into this, you need to commit. And commitment means you need to take steps. You can't just say, let's just be boyfriend, girlfriend, and have fun until this is not the way to do it. So, for myself, just as an example, I started to speak to my wife September 2005. I got engaged November of 2005, and I got married at the end of July 2006. It's like 10, 11 months. The whole process. Granted, not everyone's going to have the same circumstances or same initiation, but I remember even in October of 2005, that was 1 month, and just being on the phone, and Sarah asked me, my dad's asking, what's your plans? Are we just going to be on the phone for a year, or what are you planning? What's in your mind? I said, you know what? I'd like to get engaged. And as a matter of fact, I told her, I'm not here to toy around with your emotions. I have a goal. I want to get married. So if that's the goal, I need to take a step. So it's important to be committed and not have the lack of commitment. Also, what should not happen during courtship, the lack of church or parents' guidance. Yes, you have to make your own decision, but don't go without feedback. Don't go without feedback. At the end, if the feedback you heard, you don't like it, you still take the opinions, but don't miss out on someone's experience, someone that cares about you and your interests. The more you get good, positive feedback, the more likely you'll make a better, more informed decision. And finally, what should not happen during courtship, bachelorette parties. So, as St. Paul says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3 to 5, it says the following, and this could not fit any more perfect than what we see in our society today. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor, not in the passion of lust, like the Gentiles who do not know God. We live in a very secular society, an ungodly society, and the way, it's one thing when you take, when a bunch of guys or a bunch of girls take their friend out just to have a nice dinner, or even dare I say, take them to church and pray together before their marriage. And then versus something of, well, let's go to Las Vegas and let's get a belly dance, or this is what the Bible is very clear. And I'm sorry to say this, what a way to ruin your marriage before you get married. What a way to ruin your marriage before you get married. And some marriages have gotten ruined because of this. I've known some cases where it would end up being a big deal and cause a big problem in the marriages. Again, you want to take someone out for dinner, that's one thing. But what we see in the society and what in society encourages us at bachelorette parties, it's against the commandments of God. It's against the commandments of God, and we need to be holy. We're not, as Christians, we're holy, and the word holy means separated. we're not like the rest of the world. We live in it, but we're not from this world. We're from a different kingdom, a holy kingdom. And such as we are citizens of heaven, we need to be in that way. Holy. I'd like to share with you examples of an improper courtship. And matter of fact, maybe in the last couple of slides, I want your feedback. So I'll read this. John is a 26-year-old college graduate working for a bank and is an active church member. He began courtship with Maria, a 24-year-old teacher and an active member from a nearby church. For the last 3 months, they will have an engagement next month, and both are getting to know each other with the goal and plan for marriage by next year. They both are communicating and seeking guidance with their parents and father confession on their relationship. Seeing this, I want to ask you, what do you see as positive signs? Why would you say this would be a proper?
They're seeking guidance from their parents and father confession.
Right. They're seeking guidance from parents and father confession. What else do you see that?
They're in church.
They're in church.
Both are financially stable.
Both are what?
Financially stable.
Both are financially stable. Very good. That's actually right. What else do you see?
They're planning ahead for the long term.
They're planning ahead for what?
For marriage.
For marriage. And what are they going to do pretty soon?
Get engaged.
They're going to get engaged. So you can see commitment, you can see maturity, you can see readiness, you can see, and they're active members of the church, as Heidi was mentioning. You can see there's a lot of good things. He 2 examples of what we would consider inappropriate. Number 1, Joe is a 35-year-old surgeon who comes to church sparingly. He is currently dating a nurse at his hospital for the last 3 years, not having any thoughts of marriage. Let me start with the good. What do you see good in Joe? What's the positive thing you see in Joe? That would be one of the things.
Education.
He is what?
Educated.
He's educated. He's established. He's financially ready. He's not young. He's 35. But what do you see are signs that like this doesn't?
Helping people, healing.
I'm sorry?
He's a doctor and he's a surgeon,
Right.
and he's healing. He tries to heal people.
He's dating a nurse at the hospital. But what's happening here? What do you see is wrong?
So he's 35, but he's not thinking about any marriage.
I'm sorry. The look of interest coming up.
Okay, I'll raise my hand, sorry.
Sure.
That he's 35 and he's not thinking of any thoughts of marriage. And
He's not thinking. It's not the age as much as he's not thinking of marriage, and that's a problem. And why I'm saying this, and I purposely picked a 35-year-old person. I wanted to admit, and this is what I tell a lot of the youth. It's not just an age thing. Many people think that you're not supposed to date when you're young. And it's okay when you're an adult. No. If there's no clear goal of marriage, remember, difference between dating and courtship. Dating is a bridge. It's a means to a goal. It itself is not a goal. It's going to lead you to something. If it either leads you to holiness, which is marriage, when that's what we want, or unholiness, which is sin. There is no, we're just in it for nothing. So, and then he's seeing someone, and then he's not having any thoughts of marriage. So, then what do you think this is going to lead to? What do you think this will lead to? It will lead to sin. Another one. Anne is a 14-year-old high school student who is dating another boy from church without her parents' knowledge. She dreams of marrying after finishing law school. You guys are laughing, but let me start with what we say should be intent. There's an intent of marriage, It's a boy from church. But what's wrong with this picture?
Maturity.
Maturity for one, for sure. Yes, sir.
Lack of involvement of parents.
Like involving parents. It's done in secret.
My grandma, she got married when she was 15.
You know what? I'm glad. That's a very good question, and let me even add to that.
And she had 6.
Let me add to that. Saint Mary was between the age of 12 and to 15 when she got engaged. But what happened? Why this is different?
And they never gave
Because, you know, during this time, people got married at younger age. This was normal at that time. And again, you know, getting married at 15, 16, and it led to a marriage. It's not like you were in a relationship. No, most of the time back then, it was arranged marriage.
Yes.
And
it was the norm.
It was the norm.
It was also like.
But it had.
But like, and wasn't it also like if the family couldn't take care of the younger children, like it was easier to get
There are different circumstances, yes, you have points. And at the end, it still led to a marriage. At the end, it still led to a marriage. It just didn't like, well, take my daughter and do whatever you want.
No.
It still led to a marriage. Yes, there are in certain cultures where, from a financial perspective, they would give off their child to someone else in the hope that somehow it benefited the family. But in today's day and age, and number one, we have to consider laws now. What was okay back then may not be okay now legally.
Mm-hmm.
So laws are a factor.
Yeah.
And even, you know, and also back then, unlike now, where we live in a global world, where people travel all over, people used to grow up in the same city, same church for generations and generations, and everybody knew everybody. So you actually, even back then, you didn't need a year to get to know someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just probably need 40 days and that's it.
Yep. Everybody knew
You
everybody.
can't, that doesn't work now. That's the thing, it doesn't work now. These two circumstances show it would be inappropriate. Again, not just because I reach a certain age mean it's okay. If there's no goal for marriage, if there's, you can't get married within a certain time frame, if I can't commit and take a step, if I'm hiding and doing things away from my parents, something's not right. Something's not right. And usually these things tend to bring more issues and more heartache, believe it or not. And we don't wish anybody to have a heartache. We want everyone to have a healthy, successful life. Matter of fact, I don't have it with me right now, but I remember around 4 or 5 months ago, I read in the news about a research that was done. They showed, you know, especially, and I've been telling this to the young kids. Kids or youth that have not dated while they're in high school don't have any, actually tend to fare better than those that date. There was a research that was done, actually, you know, I saw it on CNN and I clicked the link to the research. They found that, you know, that academically they're sound, if not even better. They have less depression because usually, think about it, when young people date, 99% break up, don't work out. So it brings heartache, brings depression. And how many times we hear on the news that someone killed himself because they broke up with someone?
Yeah.
You know, so we had in this age, and we have to teach our kids. You know, I'm teaching my boys. This is I want to prepare them for marriage by maturing them.
Yeah.
Do all that you can to stay busy, get close to God, do well in school, get yourself ready. So when you have a family, you're not going to feel struggling. You'll be more prepared, and you'll have less heartache and less problem because most people that date at a young age, they all break up. And unfortunately, in many cases now we see that things happen to since that happened. So we're trying. This is, you know, it's something that we tell our youth. At the same time, as an older, more mature person, if I don't have intent for marriage, this is no good either. Not because I'm 35 years old or making $500,000 as a surgeon, it means that it's right. I have to have a goal for marriage. And it has to be one that leads to eternal life. Again, if we go back to the very first talk I had, marriage should lead to my eternal life. It should be a spiritual marriage, not an earthly one. It should be one that we, as a family, we raise a church in the home. And then as a family, we become citizens of heaven. So this is the end of my lecture, and I think